The surf sounds like tearing cloth. Not a poetic metaphor, cloth. Sailcloth ripped by wind, stretched until the fibers scream. AD 1590, Roanoke Island. John White steps out of a boat and into sand that will not remember his footprints by morning. The air tastes of salt and rot, the sweet-sour stink of seaweed left too long in a hot pocket of tide. He has been gone 3 years. 3 years that were not supposed to happen. 3 years bought by war. He expects voices. He expects the crack of a cooking fire, the cough of a sentry, the sudden rush of his daughter Eleanor, because she is there, surely she is there, with a baby on her hip, the first English child born in this place, Virginia Dare. He expects hunger, yes, and anger. But he expects bodies. Instead he gets an empty fort. And in the emptiness, he finds the one thing that does not move with wind or fear, a word cut into wood. A post stands at the edge of what was once order. Weather-darkened timber, rough under the fingertips, the grain lifted as if the sea air has been sanding it for years. In that wood, Croatoan. Not a prayer. Not a scream. Not a confession. A direction. A decision. And that is where our case begins, because if there was no battle here, why did they leave, and why did only one word survive? I am Professor Adrian Lockwell, and this is Archives of Humanity. Today, we treat Roanoke not as a ghost story, not as a campfire riddle, but as a war room problem with a diary's heartbeat. We will inventory the evidence like quartermasters. We will weigh motives like diplomats. And we will argue with ourselves, because Roanoke is not one mystery, it is several competing human stories fighting for the right to be remembered. In the cast, we have John White, governor, cartographer-artist, a man trained to make lines hold still on paper, now faced with a world where everything moves. We have sailors and soldiers with him, men who smell the hurricane season coming the way a dog smells lightning. And we have the absent, 117 colonists who once filled this sand with footprints and quarrels and the daily arithmetic of survival. Offstage, but decisive as any cannon, stands Sir Walter Raleigh, the patron who wants a foothold and a legend, and Elizabethize England, locked in a struggle with Spain so vast that a tiny colony becomes a pawn and then, too easily, an afterthought. And here, on these Sounds and Barrier Islands, stand Algonquian-speaking polities, Croatoan of Hatteras, Secatan, and others, people with their own rivalries, memories, and reasons to treat strangers as tools, threats, or prey. White's objective is brutally simple: learn what happened. But his method cannot be romance. A commander does not solve mysteries with poems. He solves them with supply math, evacuation logic, alliance incentives, and enemy capability. And his clock is ticking in real time. The Atlantic is not a backdrop, it is a judge. Hurricane season closes like a fist. His ships cannot anchor safely for long. Every hour ashore risks the rescue party, just as every hour, 3 years earlier, the colonists once spent debating their next move may have decided who lived. Now, step with me into the case file. First, strip away the sentimental varnish. This was never merely a settlement. It was an early modern outpost in a global contest. England is probing Spain's Atlantic monopoly the way a thief tests a locked door, quiet at first, then harder. A colony is not just farmland. It is infrastructure, a harbour for repairs, a resupply point, a platform for privateering, a living flag planted in contested space. Even failure can be useful as propaganda, so long as someone can spin it. And that is why we must keep asking, who needed Roanoke to succeed, who needed it to vanish, and who needed the story to stay unresolved? The timeline matters, because time is the hidden weapon in this story. AD 1585, the first English outpost on Roanoke, commanded by Ralph Lane. Picture it, men in wool and leather sweating in a humid world that eats iron with rust, where powder must be kept dry as scripture, where every nail is precious. They arrive with hunger for profit and fear of Spain. Relations with local communities fray, friction over food, suspicion over motives, the kind of small misunderstandings that become lethal when winter arrives. Lane's men leave in AD 1586 with Francis Drake, because Drake is a moving fortress and a sure passage home. Leaving is not noble, but it is rational. Then AD 1587, a new colony. Not an army, not a fleet, families. Men and women, the sound of crying infants mixed with the rasp of saws. They were originally intended for the Chesapeake Bay, a better harbor, a stronger strategic point. But they land at Roanoke and remain there, whether by misjudgment, by weather, by persuasion, by sheer momentum is still debated. John White is among them, and in this precarious place his granddaughter is born, Virginia Dare, AD 1587. A birth is a claim. It says, we are not merely raiders. We are here to stay. And then, the lifeline is cut by distance and politics. White returns to England for supplies, expecting to come back quickly. But England is bracing for Spain. AD 1588, the Spanish Armada crisis. The realm is mobilized. Shipping is militarized. Private vessels are seized or redirected. Men who would have carried flour and tools to Roanoke instead carry guns, shot, and orders that smell of state survival. This is the quiet pivot of the entire tragedy. The colony's needs become a strategic afterthought. By AD 1590, White returns at last. And finds emptiness. Not chaos, emptiness. There are signs, reported later, suggesting an intentional dismantling rather than a panicked flight. But reports are slippery. Memory is politics. And a shoreline is a shredder of evidence. Let us examine the geography, because geography is the oldest conspirator. Roanoke is exposed, barrier islands, shallow sounds, treacherous inlets. It is not a stable platform, it is a shifting negotiation between land and water. Resupply is knife-edge work. Rain ruins powder. Salt air rusts iron. Worms chew hulls. Storms erase tracks, flatten gardens, and turn a planned crossing into a drowning. A colony without steady stores becomes hostage to local ecology and diplomacy. If you cannot grow enough, you must trade. If you cannot trade, you must take. If you take, you make enemies. And enemies, here, do not need cannon to kill you. They can simply decide not to feed you. What did the settlement look like? Think in timber, not in romance. A palisade, upright logs, sharpened, lashed and set into the earth. Thatch roofs that smell of dried grass and smoke. Storage pits where grain might be kept, if grain exists to store. Boats drawn up into the shallows, because water is the only road that matters. The forensic question is simple to ask and hard to answer. Was the site abandoned in haste or method? White's later account suggests items were taken. He does not report mass graves. He does not describe a clear burn layer. But you and I must be disciplined. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Coastal environments destroy proof. Sand buries, salt corrodes, storms rearrange the scene like rough hands sweeping a table clean. And then we come to the protocol, the little piece of planned reason that people create when they fear the irrational. White and the colonists reportedly agreed, if they relocated, they would carve a message telling him where. If they left under duress, they would add a Maltese cross. Think of it like a siege code, a last signal to confirm whether the move was voluntary. On the post, there is Croatoan. But the cross is not recorded. So, was this a calm relocation? Or was the cross erased by weather, time, or human hands? Or was it never carved because there was no time, or because someone else controlled the site by then? That missing cross is the silence in the middle of the sentence. Now bring in the belligerent we rarely give a name, drought. Later tree-ring studies suggest severe drought conditions in the region around AD 1587 to 1589. Drought is not scenery, it is an invading army. It shrinks maize harvests. It makes rivers stingy. It concentrates people around reliable water. It intensifies competition. Under drought, generosity becomes risk. Hospitality becomes bargaining. A stranger at your storehouse is not a guest, he is a mouth with a shadow. And this brings us to the political landscape. The English did not step into empty wilderness. They stepped into networks of kinship, tribute, rivalry, and memory. In such a world, a small English group is simultaneously asset and liability. Asset, metal tools, prestige goods, the terrifying theater of firearms, potential allies against rivals. Liability, mouths to feed, disease risk, attention magnet for enemies, and the problem that these strangers keep building fences and calling it permanence. Also, memory. The earlier Roanoke venture of AD 1585-1586 had included violence and mistrust. A community wrong does not reset because a new ship arrives with different faces. The land remembers, even if the sand does not. So we place the competing theories on the table like weapons, and we inspect each for weight, reach, and likelihood. Theory 1, relocation to Croatoan, Hatteras Island, because the word itself points there. This is the cleanest reading. They carved the destination. They dismantled what they could. They moved to a community with whom they had some relationship. Perhaps they integrated, partially or fully. Theory 2, movement toward the Chesapeake, the original plan. Perhaps Roanoke was always a mistake, and once they realized rescue was not coming, they attempted to correct course. Theory 3, violent removal, attack by regional rivals, punitive action, entanglement with later Powhatan consolidation, or even Spanish hostility. Spanish is a tempting villain because Spain is the empire in the room, but temptation is not evidence. Theory 4, gradual attrition, starvation, illness, accidents at sea, internal fracture, ending not in one dramatic massacre but in dispersal, absorption, and death in small numbers that leave no signature. And we have material clues that still provoke arguments in rooms full of educated adults. The inscription, Croatoan versus Croatan, spelling variations that likely matter less than intent. Reports of dismantled structures, suggesting planning, not panic. Later claims of Europeans among indigenous groups, often politically motivated, sometimes sincere, frequently unprovable. Archaeological hints, European objects found at sites on Hatteras Island and elsewhere, but trade moves objects without moving people. A copper trinket can travel farther than a living body. So how do we adjudicate? We stop asking what makes a satisfying story and start asking what makes sense under pressure. Put yourself inside the colony in late AD 1587, then AD 1588, then AD 1589. You have a finite stock of food and tools. You have made promises to people back in England, but those promises do not fill a pot. Your leader has sailed away to fetch supplies and has not returned. Weeks become months. Months become the kind of silence that feels like betrayal. You have neighbors whose language you do not fully understand, whose politics you only dimly perceive, and who are watching your stores the way hungry men watch a bakery door. What do? Do you stay put and hope, while your maize fails under drought and your hunters return with less each week? Do you raid and guarantee retaliation? Do you split the group, which lowers consumption but raises vulnerability? Or do you negotiate, attach yourself to a stronger local community, offer skills, labor, and prestige goods in exchange for protection and food? When the supply line fails, ideology collapses into arithmetic. This is where the war that delayed white becomes more than background. AD 1588, the Armada crisis, is a battle fought far from these sands, yet it is the siege engine that crushes Roanoke. White's delay is not merely a personal failure. It is the state's decision to prioritize the realm's survival over a frontier experiment. In a war room in England, Roanoke is a line item. On Roanoke, it is a throat. And when help does not come, the colony must act as if it will never come. Now, let us debate the first great clash of perspectives, integration versus violence. The integration case begins with the carved word. Croatoan reads like an address. If you are being slaughtered, you do not usually leave tidy directions. The reported dismantling suggests a move planned long enough to salvage timber, tools, perhaps even boats. No clear signs of a fight were reported. And the protocol, the cross for duress, appears absent, suggesting they were not forced. In this view, the colonists did not vanish. They crossed a border. They traded English separateness for human continuity. Their names may have been translated, their children adopted, their accents dissolved into new kinship lines. If so, then Roanoke is not a tale of annihilation but of assimilation under stress, survival by becoming someone else. But the violence case refuses to be dismissed, and it has sharp teeth. First, coastal evidence disappears. Bodies can be scattered by animals, buried by storms, dissolved by time. Second, a forced removal does not require a dramatic battle at the fort. A hostile group can wait until people are foraging, fishing, gathering wood, then strike in fragments. Third, the distress sign might have been prevented. An attacker controlling the site could have allowed the carving of Croatoan as a decoy or as a misdirection, or could have erased the cross. Also, not all duress looks like screaming men at the gate. Duress can look like quiet hunger, a council where local leaders say, "You will leave. You will go there. Or you will not eat." In that scenario, the fort is taken without a shot, conquered by the withholding of maize. And now, complicate it further, these are not mutually exclusive. What if a portion relocated to Croatoan, while another tried for the Chesapeake? What if the initial move was voluntary, but the later years brought disease, rivalry, and a second wave of violence? A community can successfully evacuate and still later be destroyed, just off our stage, in a place we did not excavate, in a season no one wrote down. Consider the incentives like a strategist. Who benefits from keeping colonists alive? A Croatoan community might benefit: extra labor, extra prestige, access to metalworking knowledge, perhaps leverage against rivals. Who benefits from erasing them? Rival polities might benefit by denying enemies those advantages, or by removing a destabilizing presence. The English, later, might benefit from a mystery, too. A vanished colony can be used as tragedy, as warning, as justification for harsher policies. Sponsors prefer myths over audits. Myths recruit investors. Audits demand accountability. Return to white on the sand. He is not only a governor. He is a father and a grandfather. His mind is a battlefield between grief and procedure. He touches the carved letters as if they might still be warm from the blade. Croatoan. He knows this name. He has heard it spoken in councils. He has mapped these waters, drawn their lines with ink that bled slightly on paper in English humidity. In his head, the word becomes a route. If he can sail there, perhaps he can recover them. But the Atlantic does not care about reunions. Weather turns. Anchors drag. Ships are expensive creatures made of wood, rope, and courage, always one storm away from becoming wreckage. White's party cannot linger. And here is one of the cruelest small details: even if Croatoan is a direction, it is a direction that requires time, good fortune, and a captain willing to risk his vessel on dangerous inlets. The rescue itself is fragile. The rescuer can become the next lost party. Now, weigh the Chesapeake theory. It has an attractive logic: the original destination was better. A more secure harbor, more fertile prospects. If you were a colonist thinking long-term, you would not choose a shifting barrier island as your permanent home unless forced. So perhaps, once White failed to return, they decided to execute the original plan. But then why carve Croatoan? Some argue it could be a staged message, an intermediate stop, or a note meant to say, "We went among the Croatoan first, with the expectation of moving again." Others argue that Croatoan could have been the safer immediate refuge, a place to wait out drought or hostility before attempting a more ambitious move north. The Chesapeake theory does not die, it simply demands more steps, and each step is another chance for the trail to be erased. Now the Spanish theory. It arrives in almost every telling because Spain is the era's great shadow. Spain has treasure fleets, garrisons, and a reason to strangle English footholds before they grow teeth. Could Spain have struck Roanoke? Strategically, it is not impossible. Practically, evidence is thin for Spanish action specifically here, at this time, with this precision. Spanish intelligence did operate widely, but raids leave traces in records, and we do not have a clear paper trail tying Spain to a Roanoke strike. Still, we must admit, records can be lost, and operations can be unofficial. The Spanish theory remains the kind of possibility that keeps historians honest, because it reminds us that silence in archives is not innocence. But as detectives, we do not let a powerful empire become our default culprit simply because it feels narratively complete. Now the gradual attrition theory, the least cinematic, and therefore, often the most human. Starvation does not always arrive as a dramatic collapse. It arrives as smaller meals, then fewer meals, then days when the pot is boiled with more hope than substance. Illness arrives as coughs that do not stop, fevers that take children first, wounds that fester because salt and damp are relentless. Accidents arrive as overturned boats, as a musket discharge that breaks a leg, as a winter storm that steals a roof. Under that pressure, groups fracture. A few go to live with one indigenous community. A few with another. Some attempt a desperate voyage and never return. The colony does not end, it dissolves. Dissolution leaves fewer traces than slaughter, and it can look like magic from a distance. So which perspective best fits the artifact, the carved word, and the pattern of the site? If I were forced to bet my last ration on one scenario, I would not bet on a single event. I would bet on a process, environmental stress plus political negotiation plus gradual dispersal. The carved word suggests intention. The lack of reported fight signs suggests no sudden assault at the fort. The drought evidence supplies motive. The known indigenous political landscape supplies mechanism, absorption, alliance, coercion, rivalry. The 3-year delay supplies the trigger. If help does not come, you stop waiting and you start bargaining with the world you actually have. But let us not flatter ourselves with certainty. There is a reason Roanoke still grips us, it sits at the intersection of evidence and desire. We desire a clean answer, a massacre, a rescue, a hidden tribe of English-speaking descendants, a neat villain. But the early modern world rarely offered neat endings to fragile ventures. It offered muddle. And the muddle is the point. Now, tally the cost ledger, because every strategic decision is paid for. For John White, this is personal catastrophe. He returns not to be thanked but to be haunted. His maps and watercolors become memorials, proof that people existed, that they built, that they tried. His reputation collapses into a single question he cannot answer. For the colonists, the cost is identity. Whether they died or merged, English as a coherent unit likely ended. Names changed. Language shifted. Children grew up calling other adults mother and uncle and meant it. For indigenous communities, the cost is risk, disease exposure, entanglement in English-Spanish rivalry, and later English narratives that weaponize the mystery to justify occupation. A mystery is not harmless. It can be sharpened into policy. Here is the pattern recognition, the blueprint beneath the chaos. Roanoke is not primarily a story about vanishing. It is a story about logistics and coalition politics. Overconfidence sends people across an ocean with brittle plans. Innovation under pressure keeps them alive for a season, boats patched, gardens coaxed, alliances attempted. Moral compromise appears when hunger makes theft seem reasonable. Coalition politics decides who eats and who does not. And above all, delay kills. The deadliest weapon in this case may be time itself, wielded by distant decision-makers who never had to taste brackish water. When people ask, why didn't they just stay, they are asking a comfortable question from a world of stable supply chains. In Roanoke, staying is not courage. Staying is a gamble that the next ship arrives before the last barrel empties. And once the barrels are empty, you do not have a settlement. You have a camp waiting to be swallowed. Let us speak directly about the most evidence-consistent verdict, and hold uncertainty like a knife, careful, honest, sharp. The strongest single clue, Croatoan, leans toward relocation to Hatteras and the Croatoan communities, likely driven by drought, failing supplies, and the strategic necessity of attaching to a local power structure that could feed and shelter them. I suspect it was not a single-file march into harmony, but a complicated merging, some welcomed, some coerced, some dying along the way, some perhaps attempting a secondary move north. The mystery survives because the Atlantic erases tracks and because testimony is political. The people most capable of recording what happened had the least paper, the least ink, and the least time. Now the modern mirror, because history is not an anecdote, it is a force still acting upon us. Roanoke is a lesson in fragile logistics. When the supply line fails, grand plans collapse into calories, hull integrity, storm seasons, and local diplomacy. Translate that into modern language, sanctions that choke a country's imports, shipping choke points that turn factories silent, disaster relief delayed until it becomes funeral management, bureaucracies that can move armies faster than they move food. Roanoke tells you that the difference between a functioning community and a tragedy can be one convoy, one storm, one vote in a distant capital. And it is also a lesson in information warfare. The lost colony becomes a tool, romantic, terrifying, useful. Sponsors and states prefer myths over audits. A myth makes you feel. An audit makes you accountable. The absence of records becomes a stage where anyone can perform certainty. You have seen this in your own time. When evidence is scarce, confidence becomes a commodity. The loudest voice rents the truth for a while. Finally, borders and assimilation. Roanoke forces a hard truth that many modern nations still resist. Sometimes disappearance is not annihilation, it is absorption. People cross cultural borders under pressure by marriage, adoption, coercion, bargaining, and the simple human instinct to keep children alive. The line between refugee and settler blurs fast when hunger arrives. And the moral discomfort of that blur is part of why the story keeps returning. We want a clean category: victim, hero, villain. Roanoke offers instead a crowd of frightened, calculating, hopeful people making imperfect choices in a world that does not grade on intention. So here is the policy-level takeaway: sharp and unsentimental, distant decision-makers can doom frontier communities without firing a shot. Delay is a weapon. Neglect is strategy by other means. And the people on the edge pay in the oldest currencies: hunger, disease, and the loss of a name. We return to the carved word like it is still wet. One message meant for a rescuer who arrived too late. The colony did not leave us a corpse. It left us a direction and an argument about what survival costs. The verdict, if we must carve one into our own post, is this: when the supply line breaks, human identity becomes negotiable, and the winners are not always the brave. Often, they are the connected, the adaptable, and the ones who recognize that time is already attacking them. Join the investigation. If this case tightened something in your chest, subscribe, not for more mysteries, but for better tools: how to weigh evidence, how to spot propaganda, how to read the past like a living system instead of a legend. And when the end screen appears, choose the next file we've prepared for you. Keep the session going, because these stories speak to each other, and the patterns get clearer the longer you stay with them. Now the legacy question, the one you cannot Google: if you were a parent at Roanoke, with one child and one winter left in your stores, would you gamble on keeping your English identity intact, or would you trade it away to keep your child breathing?